I want to ask about transphobia. Um, and I feel like this question isn't addressed enough. And that's all political parties. I feel like the mainstream media, the hate campaign for the mainstream media is so deafening and it's worrying. The Green Party have had issues with transphobia before. You had leadership candidates as recently as 2021 saying some transphobic remarks. Is the Green Party a home for trans people? Is it a safe space?
I don't think any political party at the moment is a safe space for trans people, and it really hurts me to say that. What I can say, though, is that I'm working every single day to do what I can to make sure that LGBT people feel welcome in the Green Party. I'm from the LGBT community myself. Being gay and being trans, of course, are two different things with two different experiences, but I think it's also really important that LGBT people stick together and understand the importance of solidarity. We're seeing the rise of fascism in the far right, both across Europe, we've just talked about the Middle East, but also we're seeing it in the UK too. And ultimately, when fascists come for one of us, they're going to come for all of us. And I think it's important that minority communities all stick together. I think there's a wider point that transphobia absolutely has its same roots in anti-Semitism, in homophobia and racism. We saw a lot of this happen around the time of Donald Trump and Steve Bannon, and there were very set narratives to try and divide communities and to try and stow division within those communities. I think some people who are not transphobic have concerns about women's rights. And I think it's only right that politicians, particularly male politicians, listen to those concerns. So listening to concerns and colluding with transphobia are two very different things. I guess there's a point where those concerns become transphobic, and that's when it's important that whether you're a male politician or not, you point out that you won't have any truck with transphobia, and transphobia is not welcome in the Green Party.
But of course, transphobia doesn't go hand in hand with women's rights. So trans people are not a threat to women, of course. And obviously there's the whole debate around trans people in bathrooms. So I hear what you're saying, that it's a difficult discussion to have.
Well, can I add, because you're making a really important distinction I should have made. So I thank you for the interjection, that the threat to women's rights, whether they're trans women or cis women, is men. So the threat to women's rights is not trans women. And I think your question is really fair. And I think it is always important to point out that the problems in society through toxic masculinity need addressing, and things like the gender pay gap, the disability pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap, all of those things need addressing too. And frequently the problem there, middle-class white straight men, not always, some of them are trying to make a difference in society, but ultimately systemic injustice points in that direction. So yeah, I wasn't for a second pitching women's rights and trans rights against each other. I think that's often the frame that's used, and I think it's helpful to hear that frame, but also to be really clear exactly what you just said, that ultimately men have a problem here, or a certain segment of men, not men generally, but a certain segment of men have a problem here. They're causing problems both for cis women and trans women.
We're looking at the Tories, we're looking at the Republican Party in the US. They are running to the right. But the Labour Party, supposedly a progressive party, Keir Starmer, human rights lawyer, is echoing a lot of transphobia. What is happening here when the Labour Party is supposed to be at least socially progressive in some sort of ways, is adopting transphobic arguments?
I think there's no way at this point the Labour Party could be described as progressive. You only need to look at things like the child benefit cap. This would be the single most important measure to lifting children out of poverty. Yet the Labour leader stands with Rishi Sunak in capping child welfare at 2 children. That's disgusting. But then, yes, we look at LGBT rights too. This would be a moment for them to show some clear leadership, to stand in solidarity with trans people. They were perfectly happy, or Keir Starmer was perfectly happy to walk in Pride a few years ago. He was happy to stand with Jeremy Corbyn, who was standing on a socially progressive platform. But then as soon as there was any pressure from the right-wing media, he absolutely played into those narratives and talked about, I don't even want to repeat the tropes. I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I also think it's not helpful to amplify unhelpful words that Keir Starmer says. I guess more widely, this is somewhere where, I do support someone like Sadiq Khan, who has been good on these issues. And when Rishi Sunak was in meetings, literally laughing at trans people, Sadiq Khan was right to call that out. And I'm really proud, actually, of the London Assembly, including Conservative colleagues like Andrew Boff, who heckled Suella Braverman at the recent Conservative conference, have been steadfast on trans rights. And I think it's a demonstration that being transphobic is not a natural place for politics to go to. It's been a very deliberate place that the right have steered, both the Conservative Party, but also Keir Starmer. And I think it's deeply problematic. And I think anyone who's in the LGBT community or considers himself an ally, just repeating "get the Tories out" is not acceptable, because you end up with a Labour government who have demonstrated themselves to be institutionally transphobic. And I think it's really important now that Keir Starmer's held to account, both on what he said, but also Labour policies, and also what he's going to say in the future. And I think unless he can say that trans rights are human rights, trans men are men, trans women are women, and non-binary identities are valid, then we have a real systemic issue, and we know we have that issue. And we've got to do everything we can to tackle it.